Let's head into the rogue matchup here, because I alluded to this earlier, but you come in and you have to play against Fnatic and you have this game plan, and then 2 days later you have to play against Rogue, which is a phenomenally different team, much more reserved, much
Yeah.
more playing for the late game, much less likely to take risks on the map or play aggressively. So how did you, over those 2 days, make this transition? Because I assume like you just can't prep for Rogue at all. You got to focus on the Fnatic map, and then you have very limited time to turn it around.
So prep for Rogue was, yeah, very, very low, I would say. It's just, you have to take it, you have a day, to kind of look at it. I don't think Rogue is a team that actually plays slow and plays for late game. I think that they also have a pretty set blueprint of what they do. They're kind of like macro Fnatic, I would say. Odo is like often in the early game playing weak side, but they really like pushing lanes. They're often trying to draft for pushing lanes in 2 to 3 lanes. You saw in our series they played Tristana mid in a winning matchup. They played Ashe mid in a winning matchup pushes. They were drafting Kalista in game 2 and game 3. In their sets before, Aphelios Thresh push. Lots of Jace games on Odo Omne. And then they use that to just play really, really good macro around their jungler. They'll try and take Rift Heralds when they can. They'll take Drakes when they can. If they're playing a playmaking bot lane, they'll probably like gank bot like once or twice, for example. They'll like gank bot on a slow push, gank bot on a slow push again, rotate for Herald, take the Herald at 8 minutes. Their jungler's ahead of level, their bot lane's ahead from their early plays. And then they just play like really, really good, clean macro. I think often their team fighting is a bit weaker. For example, in this last 2 games we played, I think both games we had a comp that should win team fights. And at some point, the games were within like 1,000 gold, both games, game 3s and 4. But I think we kind of just got outplayed a bit, and maybe the pressure was a bit too much, like map pressure, I mean. But I think they're very good at pushing lanes to enable their jungler, and their just macro is really, really good. And I think that's probably their biggest strengths.
I do think that perhaps Rogue does get more labeled that way because they don't take a lot of risks, right?
No,
And they'll just fall back to their turret and not give you an opportunity to make a play. But it's not like they're not being active on the map. Inspired is often invading the enemy jungle, or as you say, going after the river objectives. They play PvE. It's not that it's slow, it's that, or they're scaling, it's that they're playing the game right.
yeah, I think like if you're a pro player and you're sitting under your turret, an enemy just took Herald and then they walk to your lane and they pop the Herald and then they invade your Raptors. Like, okay, the kill score for the viewers might not be that good, but
Sure.
you definitely don't feel like the enemy team is playing slow or scaling or anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're definitely pushing the advantages that they
Yeah.
have. But the best way to play League of Legends is simply to out rotate your opponent so they have no opportunity to respond. Right? That's, in an ideal world, that is the best. That is the superior
to
way to
me,
play
I
the
think
game.
fans are just like conflating like player, because obviously if you think of like, when I think of Rogue, I think of Larson. It's the fucking mid lane and he's a star player for me. So when I think of the team, I think they're conflating like some of his strengths as an individual player, which is like, he is just like the modern day Frog, and he's just going to farm the fucking lane up and just carry if he gets that Orianna late game, of course. But like, the reason I always found that weird as well is like, I know they did try to play Scaling last year, but like, to me, Inspired's an early game jungler, mate. Like, that guy wants to fucking get busy on the map early.
Yeah, I think it's just more farm and objective focused, and I think he's ganking bot a lot early for sure. That is something we definitely notice in our scouting. It's like a lot of the times it's like early gank bot into Herald rotation, for example. That's like a common rogue special.
A lot of people were talking about Neon's performance later in the series, as he was definitely having some struggles. Like, I rewatched game 4 between you guys before the show this morning, and he did seem at times like he was pretty aggressive in his approach, especially on the kind of critical fight that you guys were playing in the mid lane, where he zoomed in, and some of that's like a bunch of people flashing on him, which happens, right? Sometimes you have to make those aggressive plays. But compared to the previous playoff series that you had, did you feel that Neon was having an off day, or were there things about kind of Hans Sama playing and Trimby playing these aggressive Kalista lanes that were giving him trouble?
Well, it's really hard, I think, for him, especially in, I think it was game 3, the one we lost to Kalista, the first loss to Kalista. Like
yep.
I don't think Neon has his best series for sure. But like, as a viewer, sometimes people just see like 0-4 and they're like, oh, this guy's feeding. But if like you have no summoners and the wave is pushing into the enemy, and enemy mid has push and his jungler's there, and they have Kalista, like the strongest early game gank setup, like ADC in the game, like it's hard. You know, it's a really, really hard scenario to play, and often it requires like our mid jungle to play differently, or maybe our top doesn't have TP advantage, even though we put resources top. But for example, in one game, like we lost mid TP early, right? And then we're actually kill the Kalista and we're winning bot, but enemy mid has TP advantage because of whatever. I forget what happened in the mid lane, and then just get TP'd behind. And yeah, maybe if they're super on the ball, they could have like swept the ward or something. But I think it's a lot more complicated than just saying like Neon played bad because he died a bunch. Obviously, the Kai'Sa ult in the last game probably wasn't very good, but I don't even know if we win the fight anyways. I haven't really rewatched it, but yeah.
That's fair. You don't have to rewatch it for a bit,
Yeah.
right?
It was a bad engage, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. I liked some of the adaptations that you guys were making, especially even though you did end up, losing the third game and there was kind of this very strong Kalista in the game. I appreciated you picking the Wukong top as a team fight later game answer to try and deal with the Kalista, because playing a lot of more traditional, like if you had played Scion in top, for example, I don't know if you would have ever been able to get back to the Kalista, for instance. Was that what was going through your head in the draft?
Yeah, the idea, at least in the series, was like, okay, we won with superior team fighting comp against Kalista in game 2. Game 3, like, was really, really won, and then Kalista just got giga fed. But just because that happens in one game doesn't mean that will always happen. And like, I don't think Kalista in pro play is like this super insane, gonna get ahead no matter what champion. So yeah, we just
No,
tried to
I would say it's pretty bad, actually.
yeah, we just tried to pick good team fighting champs against Kalista, and figure that if we have like strong engage and champs that can get on Kalista and lock her down, like Wukong for example, that we should be able to win the fights. And honestly, I think if we play some of these fights and situations a little bit better, I think we really would have won with our drafts. I think they played better. So
I see Kalista as a pretty big risk right now, at least in terms of pro play. So I was surprised to see Rogue's commitment to the pick over this series. Because it does feel like there, with the how much emphasis there is on 5v5 team fighting these days, and how quickly you can get to that point if teams are approaching like soul point. It does seem like she falls off relatively quickly unless you get an absolutely insurmountable, enormous lead out of the bottom lane.
yeah, for sure. But yeah, no, I agree.
What was the reason for like Broken playing a different champion every single game? Like what's going on there? Because before that, he seemed to have a fairly defined champion pool.
What was the first game matchup? I'm trying to remember
The first one was Aurelia versus Karma.
Okay, yeah. Well, first game draft, I feel really bad about this one myself personally, because I think this was actually one of those rare cases where the game is actually probably not winnable from draft against a team that is playing like really, really well, which they were. That's just lane counter. You saw he got like up 100 CS and killed him twice, for example. But like, I think Aurelia probably wasn't useful enough against enemy champs. Team comp actually had no engage tools to actually like get the Aurelia into the fight. So it ended up being like kind of a greedy pick, and we didn't play the rest of the map good enough to win. I think game 2 was what?
The Nocturne one.
Oh, Nocturne. Okay, yeah. This was the one thing that we got to prep between the Fnatic set and the Rogue set was Nocturne flex between like mid and top lane, and I guess jungle.
So this might have actually gone to mid.
Yeah, you can play it. You can play it jungle. You can play it mid. You can play it top. We already played it mid, right? In the last week of LEC. With the Nocturne Karthus team.
It was good.
Yeah. And the idea behind that, I guess it's where our season's over, so I can say is like Oda was playing a lot of Jace and Gnar blinds only. These were like his only blinds. So I thought it would be really good for the set to have at least one champ that I feel would fit with the engage comps we were playing that was also good against Jace and Gnar. So we did a bunch of research, and that was the one I came up with, and we just spammed it like 5 games in a row on Saturday, and it's just what we prepared, and I guess it got us a win, so it was pretty good. Wukong was just a team fighting counter to Kalista, also winning matchup against Urgot. He also solo killed him in this game, so I think it was a good pick.
I was surprised because I didn't know that about the Wukong Urgot matchup at all.
Yeah,
because I mean I don't see it. So
yeah, apparently it's Wukong winning. You can like block a lot of the moves with your clones, for example, and then in the all-in you can win. Urgot's kind of OP champ though, so it's it's still like I'm still not unhappy if I were to be playing the Urgot side on my team.
Fair enough.
What was the attitude
So
that you guys had?
Yeah, go on.
Sorry. What was the attitude you guys had after this loss? Because I know this was probably really hard, but considering the end of your season, your very strong performance, taking G2 to 5 games, like convincingly dumpstering Fnatic, and then this was a really competitive series overall. So I look at Schalke and I say, wow, this is like a great playoffs performance. It's kind of what you would have wanted to have happen at the end of summer 2020, where you guys like make it to playoffs, but you don't actually go that far, or like seem like a legitimate contender. Because coming into this Rogue match, nobody would think it was ridiculous to say that Schalke is going to win this series after seeing you guys play.
I think both sets were very close, and both sets were very winnable. I do think, like, right now at least, we are a bit behind the top 3 teams, just from scrimming them a lot and seeing our stage results against them throughout the year. I think we still didn't have that great of a results versus the top 3 teams throughout all of this year. But I think it feels good to know that we're competitive, especially considering at one point I was wondering if we would be able to make playoffs. Being pretty solidly like 4th place and able to take games and maybe even sets off the top 3, I think is good. Like the goal of this team is just to make the World Championships. That's I think everybody came to this team for that very specific reason. And it's kind of like bittersweet that I think it's possible, and that really encourages us a lot, but I still think we're not quite there yet.